So our first session this afternoon is Neurodiversity Hiring, Accessibility, and Considerations for Success. And our speaker is Christine Hugh. She is the Program Director for the Learning Academy Services at USF and has been with the program since 2014. Christine received her master's degree in child and adolescent behavioral health from USF and is now pursuing her PhD in behavioral and community sciences from USF as well. She spent her career in the field of disabilities with the focus on employment and transition. Christine is committed to offering opportunities for gaining employment, learning, and community capacity building with the goal of enriching the lives of persons with autism and other disabilities. Christine, take it away.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you everyone for having me. I am going to share my screen and get started. Okay, thank you again for having me. And just as a heads up, I cannot, until I stop presenting, I cannot see the Q&A. So to the team, please let me know as questions come up towards the end. But again, thank you for having me. And today I'm kind of going to continue the conversation based off of what Gary and Scott were talking about and really look at how do you implement if you're convinced after hearing from Gary and Scott, you know, I want to implement this, or I really want to find businesses that can, you know, hire my son, my daughter, can hire me as an individual with an intellectual or developmental disability. There's some things you can look at to find success. So today, we're going to talk about neurodiversity and the different terms that are used around that and what it is. We're going to also talk about considerations before hiring, where you can start as a business, and then inclusive practices that promote success. So the term neurodiversity is defined very differently depending on who you speak to, whether it's an individual who considers themselves neurodiverse or someone who is, you know, who has decided to define it themselves. But I went off of the dictionary, and as you can see here, neurodiversity is defined differently depending on the concept and how you refer to it. So you see here's individual differences in the brain functioning regarded as normal variations within the human population. The concept that differences in brain functioning within the human population are normal and that the brain function is not neurotypical should not be stigmatized. And then the inclusion in a group, organization, etc., of people with different types of brain functioning. So as you can see, we're looking at the neurological differences in people, and that can be vast. It is not just autism, although maybe many people refer to autism as neurodiversity, but it really opens itself up to welcoming different people into your workplace. So neurodivergent conditions, you're going to hear me throughout the presentation use neurodiversity, neurodivergent, neurodiverse. And again, depending on the person, you're going to hear this used differently. But these are some of the common neurodivergent conditions you may hear of. And you can see it varies from autism, ADHD, dyslexia, anxiety, OCD, epilepsy, a lot of learning disabilities, Tourette syndrome, etc. And I have the link at the bottom if you'd like to learn more about these conditions, how it impacts folks, or the other conditions that fall under the neurodiverse umbrella. And so when you look at this, as a business, as someone who may be serving this population, you want to also be aware that someone with autism can also have a learning disability, can also have an intellectual disability, can also have ADHD. So folks are coming to you as they are. They're coming to you as someone who may need a variety of accommodations. They may be coming to you and only disclosing what impacts them. And so keep that in mind as you're considering looking at, and as Scott mentioned earlier, the idea of hiring folks, there is definitely a benefit, but use of universal design to accommodate folks within your organization. So if you're a business that again is saying, I am very interested in creating a program in hiring people with disabilities who are neurodivergent, I'm very interested in seeing if I could serve the folks who are already here and make them feel more welcome. I always say, start with why. What is your why? If you are an individual, you may not be the owner, you may not be the CEO. You may be someone who works the front desk, but this is something you're passionate about. Consider your why, even if you're in leadership. So some of the common whys that have come our way as we've worked with businesses over the years are listed. And I'll go very briefly over each one and what should be a reasoning and what shouldn't. Right now, neurodiversity, neurodivergent, those terms are very popular. They're very trendy, and it is leading a great cause, honestly, to make workplaces more accepting, inclusive, and equitable to this population. But trends and popularity, they don't last forever. So if you're going for something to get the attention right now, while that's great because you should look at the notoriety in your business, the representation in your business, that should not be your only reason. Scott gave some great data as to why this is a good idea. So the biggest thing is making sure you understand that this is good for your business. And it really is good for any business because of the unique contributions these folks can make to your workplace. Also, again, as we look across the country, across the world, different larger companies, smaller companies are looking at their DEI goals. And does this align with those goals? Should you create an area within your DEI section of your business that is for neurodiverse or individuals with disabilities? And again, staffing needs. As we talk about, the continuation of this conversation of utilizing social capital, considering that it is hard to hire, it is hard to find good people. There are millions of individuals who you can tap into if you create the environment for it. And again, we're going back to the retention issues. These folks are far more likely to stay in a role if they could bring their whole self to work. If you are already an organization, a firm that is people first, that values allyship, looking at some way to implement neurodiversity hiring, creating that culture of equity and inclusion in your business for this population is right where you should be. So as you consider, you have your why now, and you know that the why will give you a good argument. As you consider, what are my next steps? First, step back and look at what's in place. Do you have current DEI programming? Again, based on the businesses that I've worked with over the years, some of them have just started exploring DEI for a certain population: women, people of color, veterans, the list goes on, LGBTQ. So either they're just starting that and they're trying to just touch on every minority population you can think of, or they're saying, you know what, we found success in these areas and now we want to focus on disability or neurodiversity hiring. Either way, look at what's in place. And if you have some things in place, what are those transferable maybe areas of other DEI programs that you have that could also work for this population? Do you have existing resource groups? Do you have representation already? If you don't, that's something to consider. The number of employees who identify as neurodivergent. So as you work with human resources, and especially if you're in a leadership role or you're someone in HR, do you have a high number of individuals who are identifying as neurodivergent or has identified having one of the conditions that I mentioned earlier? And if you're seeing, and I'll be very honest, I talk to a lot of colleges who say, we have a ton of people who are autistic who are coming to our college because we're, a tech focused college or whatnot, and we're considered an autistic or autism friendly college somehow, and we never put it out there. So sometimes folks who are neurodivergent may navigate naturally towards your organization. But looking at that and seeing what has worked for these individuals, again, doing that internal assessment is important. And then, of course, looking at your recruitment, onboarding, and retention process. And is it already set up in a way where you consider universal design from the get, and there's alternative ways to support folks through this process? Or do you have to start from scratch? But looking at what's in place will allow you to start where you're at, rather than trying to undo something that, works really effectively. Okay, so you're getting started. One of the first things I always recommend, or at least one of the first things when it comes to businesses approaching us, is they have someone who's a champion. Again, whether that's an individual who is, I'm just really passionate about it. I am impacted by autism or neurodiversity myself, or I have a family member who's impacted by one of these conditions. And so you're someone who is willing to, and it does work out this way, invest in your time, volunteering your time to get something started. But you should have champions both at the C-suite level, all at the C-suite level, VPs, leadership, but also those in day-to-day operations. And I say that because it is those who's in the VP, C-suite level positions who can move things forward and support your initiative through funding. But those who are, working in the day-to-day operations, who are not in any type of supervisory role, they're equally important to supporting a neurodiverse workforce. So looking at champions, how many do you have? How do you get the champions involved? I will strongly recommend that you do not consider having someone volunteer I always say, are you voluntold? Are you being made to do this? Were you pulled from your parts of your job to volunteer to do this? You're not going to get the same level of engagement and motivation that you'll see by someone who is naturally just engaged and interested in that type of area, or in that area of DEI. And then looking at resources, again, you should be, and this is the fourth bullet, but either taking a self-assessment as a company. There's resources out there where it gives you an idea of what you should be looking at. I mentioned some of that earlier, and I'm talking about it now. Assessing what's already in place and what you need to get started, or pulling in an outside organization to come and observe, to talk to you, to ask the right questions. But they're going to ask about resources. Do you already have educational materials? Do you need training? Do you understand what how people are impacted by these conditions? Do you have the proper technology in place? And that is something that later in this conference you're going to hear about, but some accommodations are related to technological needs. Do you have, again, those champions, those people who are willing to mentor individuals? And you can even start with those who mentor your interns or very entry-level staff. And again, pulling in outside experts. This should be a few folks. It should be individuals who are neurodivergent, but also maybe those people like us in the Learning Academy. So employment services providers, organizations that specialize in autism, neurodiversity, or whatever area you're looking to focus on. And then your partnerships. So some ways to pull in the right resources is to partner with your local vocational rehabilitation agency. VR Love, so I'll refer to vocational rehabilitation as VR. VR loves partnerships with employers, and they're in every county in the state of Florida and in every state. While they work differently, they definitely are able to support employers with your sourcing needs. So higher education is another one. There's always a students with disability services or accessibility services. There's career services. So there's a very high number of individuals who are neurodivergent who are attending college, and that number grows every year. So leveraging higher education institutions, not only for sourcing needs, but perhaps educational needs. So again, we're housed at USF. And while we have a specialty, we are here and we use evidence-based practices and we gather data and we take that research type approach to serving individuals. And again, local nonprofits, workforce development agencies, and I'll say this several times in my presentation, neurodivergent leaders. There are many of them out there who are very well versed in supporting larger businesses. Another way to get started is starting small by exposure and understanding. Bring an expert in, and defining an expert can be, someone who has spent years understanding neurodiversity and researching it. An expert is for sure someone who is neurodivergent. But again, hosting events. Events can be shadow days, training, professional development days. So days like this where you're listening to someone speak about neurodiversity and how to implement that. But the better educated that you are, the better chance you have of having a successful program or process. So again, to bringing in the same way you may bring in college students or high school students to shadow, there are many organizations across the state of Florida that work with transition age youth who are neurodivergent, who are individuals who have other disabilities, transition programs. There's an array of options for you, but bringing these folks in, because what's going to happen is you're going to get the buy-in. You're going to get those champions and invite the C-suite, the VPs, the day-to-day operations, HR, invite representatives from everywhere to be involved in this process, because you're removing the stereotypes that many people have about neurodiversity, and you're just seeing a person for who they are. And I always have a good story where we've hosted shadow days. And again, those individual employees are then following up with their leaders and saying, can't we hire an intern? I would love to hire one of these folks. Or can we hire someone to work here? Or what can we do? What are the next steps? Because now they see it. Now they experience it. So that's a great way to get more people involved in something that you as an individual in your organization are passionate about. And then having flexibility. There is no one way to find success in or at one approach that will be successful. It really depends on the organization and where you all are at. So don't think that you're going to follow one how-to booklet and it's going to work for you. So what are some things you can do? What does, a neurodiversity program or hiring process look like? Well, you can start with apprenticeships and internship programs through your partnerships, and I'll go back and forth between slides, through your partnerships with folk rehab, nonprofits, workforce development agencies, higher education. You can recruit people, and as someone who hires, I know there's a huge investment in onboarding someone permanently. Have a training program, an internship program, hire an agency to have a training program so that people are building the skills you need to be successful in your place of employment. It's just also a great way to get to know someone before you can determine if they will be a good fit for that team, for your business. And it's a win-win situation for everyone. So an internship program, apprenticeship program, yes, you're able to filter out who can be hired and who cannot be hired, and you're not investing as much money. But from the perspective of someone who's neurodiverse, they now have something to add to their resume. They have experience and they have the opportunity to visually see what that job looks like. I mentioned very briefly the skill training to hire. So I realized within organizations that we've worked with, they already have professional development training programs in place, especially to learn new technical skill sets. So if a new software program is in place, everyone has to be trained on it. So if you know there's an area of your business that is really lacking skilled staff, skilled employees, and you're willing to hire out an agency or pull somebody in to create a formal program, and you start maybe with neurodiverse folks, that's another great way, one, to train them up on the skills you need as an employer, but also to build out a skill set so these folks are able to do more for you. Structured interview process, thinking of a small pilot, outsourcing. So again, with all of this outsourcing services, so maybe you don't have the funding or the people at first to run a formal program, you can outsource it. So consider a structured interview process. Maybe you're looking at shifting the culture of your organization where you offer an interview process that works for all. And I use air quotes because yes, a lot of what works for neurodiverse folks also works for everyone else. So that can be skill-based interviews. That could be the way, the type of information you give ahead of time, make it in a welcoming environment. Hosting a small pilot is also another great opportunity. And when I say small pilot, you have an idea, you have maybe a program you want, and you want to try it out with just a couple people, with one person, that's absolutely okay. What we do here is when we try something out, we look at the outcomes, we look at the data, because it is that data you're going to need to convince whomever above you that it's worth investing funds in. And then maybe, you know, you just want to look at, again, your normal hiring process. And is this just going to be what you do? It isn't something special or a one-off or anything as part of a formal DEI program. You're just looking at making your workplace more inclusive for everyone. So moving on into recruitment and interviewing, when you're actually drafting job descriptions, I think everyone agrees on this. Try to include the qualifications and job duties that the person will actually do and that are actually required. I realize we all have to put, at least for a small portion of someone's time, as needed at the bottom, but really make it as concrete and easy to understand as possible. Don't use open-ended language. Don't mention something that you're just unsure if they'll do or not, or somebody else does, but you just pulled it in anyway as part of this job description. That makes it hard for folks who are neurodiverse, especially for those of us working with autistic adults. They're going to take that very literally, and they may not apply to that job, and you may lose out on a very qualified candidate. And then advertise your accessibility and being an equal opportunity employer. Advertise your programs too. Don't make it hard to find on the website. The same way you may advertise or celebrate certain, like we're in the middle of Pride Month. Well, we're just started Pride Month, excuse me. I see already a lot of companies changing parts of their logos, changing things on social media, posting things. You can do that for and also hosting events or giving back to organizations. There's so many ways you can advertise that you are not only accessible, but you're supportive of that population. Do the same thing for the neurodiverse population for people with disabilities. So National Disability Employment Awareness Month is October. Autism, depending on who you talk to, acceptance, inclusion month is in April. So there's different times of the year that you have the opportunity to leverage your marketing team to put it out there that you are an accessible employer. Highlight success stories around what worked. How did you accommodate folks? Don't just have a commercial where it is someone in a wheelchair. A lot of neurodiverse folks have hidden disabilities where you won't know that they have a physical disability unless it's very apparent. Some have both. But it is very important that you highlight the different ways you make yourself the best option, because it is a competitive time for employers to get qualified candidates. And so you want to make sure you set yourself apart. And then partner with organizations. We do this at least once a year where we hold a mock job fair, and we're happy to hold a real job fair, but we pull in real employers to give our folks a chance to have the job fair experience, but you come in to recruit. And even though we're hosting a mock job fair, a lot of employers give us positive feedback. And yes, they're real employers coming to this where they're like, I actually took that person's resume because we have a position open that I think they would be great for. So organizations that serve this population, do your research, make sure they're reputable, make sure they have good outcomes, make sure they're not charging you an arm and a leg for something. But find something that works, an organization that works well with based on what you need as a business, as a firm, and take the next steps to maybe host a job fair, maybe go in and do a talk or a mock interview day or an interview day on site with these organizations. Interviewing. So be very transparent with interview accommodations and be transparent with participants. There is obviously a limitation to what you can do, but many folks who are neurodivergent are nervous about and this is based on their experiences growing up and as adults, that if they disclose, they're not going to be hired. One of the reasons why advertising that you are a welcoming employer is important, but also being transparent in the interview process. You will be interviewing with 3 people. There is a 3-step interview process. You will be interviewing off-site. Given those additional details are very, very important. Speaking directly to the candidate. So I always say, when you leverage an accommodation such as a job coach that comes with the individual, don't talk to the job coach. The job coach is there if someone freezes up or can assist with the beginnings of accommodations for this person or implementing them during the interview process. But don't talk to the job coach, because the job coach isn't going to be working there. The individual is. And the individual is a person and is taking that interview very seriously. Be consistent in questions, regardless of the person's ability. So if you seek to get information, you have to offer in the interview process different ways for that person to deliver. So if someone who may be nonverbal may communicate differently, do you have the supports in place? A skill-based interview. Maybe they can't verbalize for different reasons their ability, but maybe they can show you. Accept maybe video resumes and offer, again, that interview where you give them some type of work that doesn't go against your confidentiality practices. And or even just asking them in the interview, can you write it down for me? But offer different ways to ask the same question. So you're setting the expectation and the tone that you treat people equally, but you're willing to accommodate them. So again, those interview alternatives are very, very important. Onboarding. So because we're looking at neurodiversity and the diversity within that and the many, many conditions that someone could live with or that fall under that umbrella, you want to be prepared in different areas. So you want to look at the environmental setup. For some folks with neurodiverse are impacted by a neurodiverse condition, they may have sensory issues with their environment, so they may disclose that. So take a look at having, and I see a lot of larger businesses doing that, quiet spaces. You know, if people are in cubicles or you have a very open workspace, are there corners that can be that are more quiet and away from people who are more talkative that our folks can go to? Again, the use of certain equipment. And so consider that having someone have as much having the opportunity, excuse me, I'm tongue-tied, to maybe work in an office setting. So I know that some firms have office spaces you can in the morning set aside for yourself or request, and having maybe those spaces set up specifically for individuals who have those sensory needs, so that if they come in, they know they're going to get one of those offices. They're not in line. Again, preparing the technology. So depending on what someone needs, and I'll talk about this in my next slide, depending on what someone needs, you have that already. Don't, I'm big on being proactive and not reactive. So if you have certain tech that isn't going to be outdated within the year, have some of that ready. And that's where having those outside agencies, those experts come in, giving you that information, because someone can disclose at any point, not before they're hired, not during the interview process. They can disclose maybe when they get a promotion, but maybe they have a technological need that comes up as their responsibilities shift. So being prepared and being proactive is a great way to find success with programs like this. And then having resource hubs. So having, whether you guys have a cloud, whether you have I know employee resource groups, anything like that, but having one that supervisors and leaders and staff members can go in to understand what someone impacted by ADHD would live through. And that could be short videos, that could be handouts, it could be a variety of things. Having, listings of professional expectations and what is expected of the person in the workplace. It's different everywhere. And it's very confusing, and you should never think that someone would get it, or that everyone would just get what you expect. No one can read another person's mind. And for those that struggle with social skills, it is hard for them to read body language, let alone trying to read unspoken social cues. And then maybe enhancing your employee assistance programs. So what that can look like is additional professional development, expanding access to certain resources and therapies, the ability to hire on a job coach. Maybe you have someone that from an organization or working with an organization that you can pull in very quickly to be an accommodation for someone. But and that could, all of those resource hubs, as you develop that could be achieved through surveying your employees, working with outside entities. The opportunities are endless in that area, but having that allows staff who are working with neurodivergent individuals to know that they have somewhere to go to learn. Because sometimes the person who has the neurodiverse condition may not want to speak too deeply on it. So having some basic understanding doesn't put all the responsibility on the person with the disability. And then use checklists. It just keeps everyone organized. So having an onboarding checklist, and each step, and it's broken down and it's timeline. And so, for example, what the paperwork needs to be completed and by when. The tours, what type of tour, meet and greets, when does that happen and when should it happen? Safety procedures, anything that you do to onboard an employee, put that in writing and review it periodically with the person that you're hiring. That is a great way to make sure that everyone is on the same page and that someone who is a visual learner can follow through with that. Okay, so I have a very long list here and I'll briefly go over it. But if you think about long-term and the day-to-day support of neurodiverse individuals, you're looking at flexible work conditions and hours. That does not mean that someone who is hired for a 40-hour work week should be working 10 hours. But what it could mean is that maybe their hours, if it's possible, they could have later hours because maybe medication or they're just night owls, so they just are more productive in the afternoons, if that's a possibility. But being flexible with that would increase productivity amongst a lot of people. Quiet areas, again, is something that's important. Offering, color filters and font changes to accommodate different learning and communication styles. So some people, if they're looking at this, if this is part of the employee handbook, this may be hard to read. So being able to adjust and adapt that to someone who may be visually impaired. So I am going outside of the neurodiverse the listed conditions, but you want to be prepared for that and be able to offer that to someone or adjust fairly quickly. Giving someone the chance, and we do this in our programs and we encourage people to speak up about it, breaks during their day. Let them take, just set the expectation. If you're taking a break, you have your lunch break and we will accommodate you by allowing you to take your walks periodically. I think everyone needs that. Being able to get up and walk away for 5 minutes, take a walk, go outside, especially if you're stuck at your cubicle all day. I think there's a lot of studies out there that have shown that if you have that opportunity to take a break away from the computer, even if it's 5 minutes, you can come back and be, I think, like 5 times more productive than you were if you just sit in front of the computer all day. But for neurodiverse individuals, this is particularly important. Making sure you have bias training. So you can have someone who has the buy-in but doesn't understand that they have either conscious or unconscious bias. So being able to identify that and hold everyone accountable to being aware of those bias, if they have any, would be important. And being able to have an open conversation with that, but without, making anyone uncomfortable. If you have a program, a formal program, a neurodiversity program, making sure leadership or mentorship or buddies to staff, especially your neurodiverse staff, is fair and equivalent to what the group needs. So if you typically have one leader for a staff of 15, but you have a neurodiversity hiring program, you want to look at leadership to oversee maybe a smaller group of people, or if you have maybe someone who heads a certain team and then the buddies within that. That just helps ensure that folks get the supports that they need, and it will require some restructuring of teams. But again, if you want to look at productivity and if you want to look at good outcomes, that's something to consider. Being able to be prepared to list accommodations that you offer. Folks are worried that they may be asking too much. That's been something that has been ingrained, for many folks as they've grown up and gone through the school system and gone through society. Asking for an accommodation is you're getting special treatment when that's not the case. You just need it for equal footing to be able to do your job. Encourage, again, open communication and being willing to be an active listener and understand what the person needs. No one knows what it's like to live with a disability than the person who lives with the actual disability. And then holding regular, especially in the beginning, holding those check-in sessions, whether that's as part of the team or one-on-one outside of that, to make sure that, the person knows that it is an environment that they can go to their supervisor, go to their team member, but you have to model that. So this is where it comes to the end. I probably finished pretty quickly. But I do, before we finish up, I wanted to share for those of you that are interested in learning more about what we do, or ends up looking us up in the future, we are rebranding after 13 years. And I thought I'd make the announcement to you all today simply because we are making the announcement to everyone on Monday. So we're rebranding from the Learning Academy Services to Launch at USF. And the reason why is because we have expanded from a transition program in 2009 to, as you can see, a vast array of services and programs, including business solutions. So as of Monday, this will be our website. We're very excited. We're very happy to rebrand. And it's going to make a huge difference for us as we continue to expand our services. And then connecting with us, especially as of Monday, all of our socials, our website, our general contact information, and our newsletter. And then also we do have that survey. The same one that Scott sent is the one that we would use ourselves. We'd love your feedback on how we can improve our educational trainings. So I will open the floor to questions.
You can type your questions into the chat, the Q&A section, and we'll read them and get those questions answered. If you are unable to find the Q&A section, please feel free to type it into the chat or raise your hand. So while they're thinking of questions, Christine, can you give us an idea of some of the higher level jobs you've assisted individuals to obtain who are neurodiverse, and some of the more entry level jobs you've assisted individuals to obtain?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. So we get people from all walks of life, all the way up to their PhD. And being prepared to find employment for them is a challenge, but one we welcome. And so we've had people who just want to work in grocery stores, who want to work at the local Target so they can get a discount on stuff, or work in the tech section, all the way to folks who are software developers, software engineers. We've also helped people open their own business. So really, anyone can come to us for employment services, and we're going to find them the job that they want. Even folks in human resources, sometimes the transition from one state to another can be hard, and accessing the proper supports and services can assist with, can be really important because they don't know how to navigate that system.
Okay. And would you say there are any individuals who just simply are never going to be able to work?
Nope. I will never say that. I believe there's opportunity for everyone. And I think as we come into this new age, especially after the pandemic, if working for the man is not for you, self-employment is an option. But just the biggest thing is finding the right support system and village to help you on your journey. You should never allow someone to tell you you can't get a job. There's even customized employment where businesses are willing, because there's a need there, to create a role for someone that would fit their needs, but also be beneficial to the business. So yeah, that's a strong no from me.
I concur. Thank you very much for that.
No problem.
Any other questions for Christine? Thanks for the presentation. Congrats to the whole team on launching Launch. Yes, that's awesome and amazing. And I think it is going to be a great experience. So we go back to sharing my screen. And of course, Christine, we have a question for you. Christine Hugh, what does talent actualized mean to you?
I'll start with the individual. Talent actualized for me would mean that someone can bring their whole self to work and not feel like that there's barriers to where they want to be, who they want to be, and what they can contribute to the workplace. That is a very lofty goal, but I think we are slowly but surely getting there. At a larger scale, I think talent actualized, say from business perspective, is that businesses feel confident in their ability to support anyone that comes in, whether they're an individual with developmental or intellectual disability, they're neurodiverse, whatever it is. But they are at the point where they don't need to create these special programs because they're finally just at a point where they just know what they're doing and they're willing to hire whoever will fit the role.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. And again, just a reminder, you can complete our survey. Your feedback does matter.
Please visit our website for more information about our programs, projects, and how you can get involved.